I'm the CEO of the Port of Townsville. I've been the CEO for the last 3.5 years. I've worked with the Port for 20 years. So today, what I wanted to do was just give you a brief overview about what we do and about the Port Expansion Project. I know there was a lot of topics that people wanted to cover, and we have held forums to go through the project in a lot of detail and our trade forecast. I'm just going to touch lightly on them because there is a lot of detail there as well. I've handed out slides, so you've got the information, but as Lorna said, there's certainly avenues to be in touch with us at any point in time, and we're all directly contactable to go through any element that you like in detail because there is a lot of information. But I guess the introduction to today and why we're so interested about sessions like today, and it's not the last session, there's lots of opportunities to work together going forward, is that the best results that we've ever seen in our port history, and we've been operating for 153 years, have been when there's been really strong collaboration. We certainly don't know everything. We never protest or pretend that we do. When we've had the best outcomes for any projects we've ever worked on, it's been when we've engaged the community and have had the best knowledge and scientific expertise that we can possibly get together. That's challenging and confronting for some people because we come from different perspectives a lot of the time and we've had different experiences. We've all seen good and bad projects that have been handled, and I guess if I can leave a thought with you about what we do in our approach is we have a very strongly committed environment team in-house in our business, and their approach to environmental management is second to none in the country in terms of port operations. So we are all locals, but we have some of the best scientists in the world based right here in Townsville, so we'd like to bring parties together. So just to quickly go through what we do, I'm covering a bit of our context, our operations, touching on the drivers of growth and the need for some of our port expansion, what's making different aspects of port development driven in different timeframes, and then focusing mostly on the port expansion and the first stage of the port expansion. Some context about ports. So there's 77 ports in Australia, trading ports in Australia. We've got 15 of those trading ports in Queensland. We look after Townsville and Lucinda ports. I guess in terms of what we're designated as, the Sustainable Port Development Act was a new era in affecting ports in Queensland, which came into force in 2015. So that designated 4 priority ports where port developments are to be concentrated, and there's a lot of strong reasons around why those ports were designated by the state government as ports for future development and expansion areas. The primary ones of those being the government didn't want to see multiple ports developing along the coastline, so new greenfield ports being developed in the GBR region. They wanted to concentrate development around long-established ports where the environments around those ports are well known and where those ports are critical for serving the communities where they're located and serving the economic interests of the state in other locations. And outstanding universal values is a key component of the fabric of how we do business and how we do our developments, and we're going to share a lot of that with you today. So there can be no new ports in any other locations in the GBR region outside where those 4 designated priority ports are located, Townsville being one of them. In context with other ports in Northern Australia, Townsville's, you all know, the largest city in Northern Australia, and not all ports are the same. So I guess we're 1,360 kilometres away from our capital city port in Queensland. So there aren't normally in other states a lot of ports. Western Australia certainly has more, Queensland and Western Australia, because of our long coastlines. But the other ports in Western Australia outside of Fremantle are ports primarily servicing things like an iron ore industry. In Queensland, Townsville Port is the major, I guess, regional port for freight movement. So we're not a designated coal, iron ore port, anything like that, where in remote regions ports are developed, but we do handle the kinds of commodities that most of the capital city ports do, because most of the population in Northern Australia is centred around the Townsville region. We're within 4 hours drive of Townsville. So we're servicing 70% of Northern Australia's population. Even with ports in Cairns and Mackay, they aren't container ports and they aren't automotive ports. So it's traditionally only capital city ports that will handle the kinds of container and car cargoes and things like that. But because we're so far away and have a big enough population centre up here in the 700,000 people, we do handle those sorts of trades. In terms of size, we're about 1/3 of the size of Brisbane in a tonnage comparison, and 3 times the size of Darwin Port. So what we do and what we don't do, just some statutory context. We are a statutory, we have statutory functions. We're a port authority under the Queensland Transport Infrastructure Act. We are also a government-owned corporation, and we're a company government-owned corporation. So what that means is we have almost the equivalent of a private company structure that we have to operate under, in terms of we aren't government funded, so there is no taxpayer funding for our operations. We're funded commercially by generating revenue from cargo that goes over the wharves, and from the time that ships spend at berth, and from leasing the land that we create to customers. We're a landlord model port, so we create the land, we build the berths, and then we lease some of those out to customers who will underwrite those developments with commercial investment. So many of our berths have been funded by our port customers, and most of the cargo handling equipment that you'll see in the port has been funded by port customers like Glencore, South 32 and Stevedore and Companies, Cement Australia and others. But we also have statutory functions. So being a port authority, we are responsible for a land and sea jurisdiction of around 400 square kilometres. We have port limits that are designated, which is shown on that map. And what that means is we're responsible for these statutory functions. So we've got a legal obligation to make sure we discharge these functions within our port limits. Sitting alongside us are other statutory agencies. So just one, the main one, Maritime Safety Queensland, the Regional Harbour Master, is responsible for safety of navigation in the area. So things around how ships move, the controls around ships moving, where they can move, where they can anchor, the limits of our channel are all set by the Regional Harbour Master. So we work very closely with the Regional Harbour Master. We also have VTS based in Townsville, which is Maritime Safety Queensland. So VTS is the vessel tracking service, and they basically look after, there's two elements to it based in Townsville. We have reef VTS as well as our local VTS. So traffic movements on sea, basically from Gladstone north, can be managed out of the Townsville VTS office, and all reef movements of vessels are managed by Reef VTS based here in Townsville. So they monitor all ship movements, make sure they're on course. If there's ever a ship going off course, they are in constant contact with the captains of the ships and make sure that they remain on course and within their designated route destinations. So just a snapshot of what we do. We have 300 hectares of land. We've been operating for 153 years now, two ports, like I said. We are responsible for about 8,000 direct and indirect jobs. That's a little bit less than before these figures take out the Queensland nickel operations, which accounted for 1,000 jobs in the region. We connect this region, North Queensland, with 240 ports in over 40 countries around the world. We handle around 10 million tonnes of trade worth $10 billion a year, so it's a high value port. Some of the commodities that we handle are broken mostly into mining, agriculture, fuels and general cargo. But we handle 30 different classes of commodities. So like I said, like a capital city port, we're not really a port that just focuses on bulk product. Drivers of growth, this is a bit hard to read, but hopefully you can see it a little bit better in your packs. There's a lot of things that drive how we develop, when we develop, why we develop. I don't have enough time to go through all of it, but I just wanted to touch on a few of the key aspects of what's determining our future growth objectives and what we have to do to meet our legal obligations. So trade growth is obviously one of the biggest things. Now we don't make goods. We are here as a trade facilitator, so we have a legal obligation to make berths and land available, make sure they're safe and efficient for the economic growth of the region and to service the population, the communities that sit around this region. So what we have to do, I guess best practice planning all around the world, is that you look at cumulative port development and assessment. So you don't do projects on an individual berth by berth basis or project by project basis. We do long-term port planning because our assets last for 50 to 100 years. Obviously we've been around 153 years. Some of those berths that we built lasted over 100 years. So when we're looking at our trade forecast, most ports around the world do this, that are like the capital city and major regional ports do long-term planning that looks at trade scenarios. Obviously over 100 years, we're never going to get it right. Sometimes we're right, very often we're wrong. No one can predict what's going to happen in the future. So we're subject to economic cycles, different changes in technologies, shipping trends, commodity prices, the currency exchange rates, anything that can happen in the world, we have to respond to. But over the last 150 years, we get a good long-term trend analysis of trade movements. So What that does is we set a low trade envelope, a high trade envelope of what we think could happen if things go well, but we pretty much work on a medium trade growth forecast, which is what the most likely long-term scenario will be. So what drives our future growth in this region? On the top, in terms of our imports, it's everything that you use in the region. So when you're importing cars, bitumen for the roads, gas for your barbecue, fuel for cars, the cars people drive. Most of the world's freight moves around in containers, so shipping containers, 20-foot and 40-foot containers. So everything from computers, electric goods, furniture, clothes, medicine, they all come in containers. But we're also seeing a lot of exports going out in containers more and more. So even agriculture product like grains and rice and pulses, which is a much emerging sector in Australia, particularly in this region, as well as minerals and metals, even refined metals are going out in containers. So it's a standardised method of freight that was introduced in the 70s, only in the 70s, which is now the most common way to move freight around the world. So how we handle our product, we've got 8 operating berths at the moment. They're all different, so they're designed differently for different commodities that they handle. Some berths have dedicated cargo handling equipment, which are specialised for individual cargoes. So we have basically, I'll take you through quickly the berths. Berths 1, for instance, is a dedicated fuel berth. This is a dedicated bulk minerals berth. The thing driving most of our growth is around bulk into the outer harbour in the long term, but in the short term, over the next decade, containerised freight. So berth 3 is our main container handling terminal. That's at 80% occupancy at the moment. We're just upgrading berth 4, which is our new container terminal, to take the additional trade, and that will be finished later this year. So this is what berth 4 will look like. In terms of our growth, you could read through these customer comments in the pack, but this is just our customers in the shipping industry explaining why we need wider channels and what we're looking to do. The channel capacity project, which you'll see, there's a lot of drivers around widening of the channel as the first stage of the Port Expansion Project. That's what we're going to focus a lot on today. It's the main dredging component of the project. So what's driving it is shipping fleets increasing across a lot of sectors, but 4 key sectors that I touch on here around fuel ships, container ships, cruise ships, and also our fuel tankers. So 80% of the cruise ships built today are not able to fit into Townsville. In 3 years, 60% of the fleet in the east coast of Australia won't be able to fit into Townsville. So these are 9 of the ships that currently frequent the east coast that can't fit into Townsville. Defence ships are getting larger as well. Again, the largest ships Australia ever built are the LHDs, are 230 metres. They come in now, but Australian ships will get bigger. Australian defence ships are 36th in the list of sizes of US, European defence ships in the world. So the American ships, the Nimitz class and Ford class, are 300 plus metres. Australia will be moving in that direction. And so what I will give you is just these slides which go through what we're doing. This is just an overview of where the Port Expansion Project is. It's a 30-year development plan. We're going to focus today and bring the scientific knowledge to the table to go through what we've assessed for this project, but we are very much welcoming your discussion and your knowledge as locals who know the local community best with the scientific knowledge that our guys have to work through what the project is all about and why it is we're doing it. I guess it's not an isolated process. We have been master planning for the port since 2007. There is a new master plan coming out next year. The draft will be released mid this year. So the new master plan will need to be in place and approved before any project work start. I'm happy to be here I will be here the rest of the day, but I've also got my contact details on here where you can certainly make contact with me anytime. I'm happy to go through the detail of what we're doing and why we're doing it at any point in time. We just didn't have time today, as Adam will show you with the hat and hopefully not the whistle in a second, to get through everything in detail. But please find me during the breaks and ask me any questions you like about what our project is and what's driving the growth. So, benefits of the project, how you can get more information, but here are our contact details. So, I guess in closing, thanks for having us. Hopefully today is full of energy, and I guess we're here to listen and we're here to work with you. So thank you very much. I didn't get the whistle.